Hi, I'm Lisa Kastner. I'm the founder and executive editor of Running Wild and Rise Presses, and I'm here with actually one of my personal favorite authors with Rise, and Running Wild, Tomas Baiza. And Tomas, I still remember when we first acquired your books. You're like, "Are you serious? Are you sure you want to do this?" And you and I had like this little email exchange, and because I was like, "Yeah, no, it's for real. We want to publish your stories. They're fabulous. We'll figure out, timing and everything, later." Um, but I wanted to make sure that we had took a moment and really featured the fact that for those who may not be aware, Tomas's amazing story delivery has actually been named Treasury Valley Reads 2024 featured title. And I just want to congratulate you on that. It is such a tremendous honor.
Thank you.
But I also love for you to tell us about delivery. Like, what inspired you to write this story?
Ooh, so as a storyteller, I'll try really hard to not be too long-winded on this. The origin story of the book, which I've actually written about, to be perfectly frank with you, was born out of just anger.
Mm,
I'm a I'm a struggling musician, like most musicians are, and I
mm,
would put a lot of my late night passions and frustrations into playing music. And
mm,
I had a series of really negative experiences at a place where I spend a lot of my time and is very important to me.
mm,
And one night I just knew that I can't lock myself away in my little broom closet and play guitar and bleed away all of the feelings. And frankly, I was so angry in that moment that I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I sat down and did one of the stupidest and weirdest things that I ever could have done. And I started writing a book. My wife was in bed, my daughter was in bed, the house was
mm,
dark, and I just sat down at the computer and I started typing. And I to this day I don't know why I did that, but I'm really thankful that I did. And I didn't write knowing exactly what I was doing, other than that I understood exactly where I was at in that moment, which
mm,
was feeling as though this thing to which I had dedicated so much of my time and my essence, that I didn't fit there. And so I started writing a story about someone who just simply didn't fit.
mhm,
And I knew somehow this story was going to be based closely in some ways on things that I had experienced, but I also wanted to say bigger things that my own personal experience really couldn't tell.
mhm,
And so the process of writing the book was an exercise in what is fiction.
mhm,
And the first draft was embarrassingly, awkwardly, terribly, messily autobiographical, right? That's the
mm.
first draft. They're always bad.
Yeah.
But as each successive draft came about, I figured out how to quote unquote lie in ways that brought
Mm,
more of the truth out. And so what I wanted to end up, and as the process unfolded, I figured out over time what I really wanted to do was tell a story about somebody who was starting to realize that he's somebody, but he's
mhm,
not the thing that all of these outside external forces are saying that he is, or that
mm,
conveniently need for him to be in order for them to feel comfortable. And
mm,
so, bouncing off of all of these external forces, he slowly figures out, more so than at the beginning of the book, eventually who he is and what direction he's moving in. But it's not a direct line to enlightenment, and it's not necessarily a guarantee of success in life, but it is a clearer awareness of how the world works and how that person fits in it.
mm. Wow, that's amazing. So it's actually a really beautiful reflection of, I think, the growth that many of us go through in our lives, of that self-discovery, and that more so than discovery, but self-acceptance,
Yes,
which which
exactly.
which is so, so hard. I mean, I think so many people go through their lives and they never really truly accept themselves. And then by accepting themselves, they not acceptance isn't the right word, but they find peace with those around them and better understand how to engage those they want to engage and not engage with those they don't. So,
Right. Right. And
Um,
to the extent that they have a choice, they figure out how to engage with those people who may not be good for them because they
mm,
have a better understanding of who they are.
yes, exactly, exactly.
And when I was a young man, I could not do that. And I try to portray a character who, at the beginning of the story, is simply not capable of that. He's either going to fight or he's going to run.
Mm,
And that's obviously not a way that you can live life very happily for very long. So I wanted
yeah,
to write a story about somebody who figures out how to accept life as it is and maybe change not only himself but be a good influence or something other than awful or to the people around him.
mm.
And that was eventually part of what I wanted to do with the book.
Wow, that's wonderful. For those who are watching who may not be familiar, can you give us like a summary of Delivery? Like, what's it about?
The book is ostensibly about uh, a young man in his last year of college, and it has taken him far too long to graduate from college, longer than the traditional 4 years.
Mm,
So he spent a lot of time finding himself, and he's in his last year of college, and he's basically staring at the precipice of what he's supposed to do with the rest of his adult life.
mm,
And he's not ready. And the inciting incident is he's fired from bookstore his college bookstore job after a traumatic incident, which may or may not be based on fact, and is forced to resort to delivering pizzas
mm,
in a pretty sketchy part of town. And it's through that experience that he begins to see people for who they are because
mm.
they're honest with themselves. And he realizes slowly that he needs to be a lot more honest with himself about who he is and what he aspires to be and what he isn't that he
Right.
thought that he was.
Oh, wow. That's fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Now, I know you and I were talking a little bit before we started the live stream, and there are themes within Delivery that are it's not just about self-acceptance. There are strong LGBTQ themes within it, more of like a self-acceptance in that realm, as well as with him being the primary character being from uh, for lack of a better term, like a non-white or non, I guess, dominant. I don't know. Um, space and especially considering all of the. I mean, like even today, Publishers Weekly came out with an article highlighting an article that like the big four publishers are basically going to be suing these various states that are coming back and saying, "Hey, we're banning these books," right? And the majority of the books that they're talking about banning are do come from LGBTQ, and um, I just keep summarizing it as non-white because people of color in general, right? Books that come from that lens or those lenses, and how uh I'd love your thoughts on A, that trend, and B, um, also talk about how Delivery, I mean, even just came to the point of being a Treasure Valley Reads 2024 feature title.
Ooh, wow, a lot that I could talk about in there. Um,
Don't worry, I can
so
interrupt you.
okay, cool, thanks. Yeah, there's also editing. So when I started writing the book, as it turns out, because of how I was because of the I guess just for lack of a better word, the anger, the angst that went into the creation process,
Mm,
and that came along with it a lot of homesickness. And I don't live in the place where I grew up, and I haven't for a long time. And it's always been my home, even though I haven't spent a lot of time there since I moved away. I'm
mm,
from the Bay Area in California,
mhm,
but I left there as a full adult, and so it's definitely a part of me that'll never go away. And when I started writing the book, it wasn't necessarily an exercise in nostalgia, but I knew that if I wanted to present a character who is kind of buffeted by all these expectations of who to be, I wanted it to be in the context of a place that I knew very well, a very ethnically, racially, linguistically, um, uh, diverse and complex place where identity means a lot, but is often very hard to put your thumb on
Mm.
because it's so complex.
Mhm.
And some people see that complexity as a problem and they try to ignore it. Some people see it as a problem and they try to resolve it. And
Mm.
other people just don't see it because that's how they grew up.
Mhm.
Um, and so
Mm.
um, to me, it was totally, I didn't even think consciously about, not at first, about the people that I wrote to populate this person's life.
Mhm.
This person is half white, half Mexican. There are a lot of us back home who are half white, half Mexican. It's a dime a dozen. When I moved to Indiana, I was shocked to be considered exotic. I thought, where, how is
What?
this? What? I am so normal where I come from, but you're
Mm.
treating me like I just got off a spaceship from Mars.
Wow.
That was crazy to me. That was a lot of culture shocks. But
Mm.
back home, that's who you are. That's who a lot of people are. It was normal to me to populate the book with people who weren't just straight, weren't just cis.
Mm.
Queer folk have always been a part of my life and my upbringing and my human ecosystem, so to speak. And
Mhm.
so it was normal for me, um, and it felt right, including them in the story. And if there's one thing I would like to believe that I accidentally did right,
Mhm.
I included them in the story in a way that was so unself-conscious that I hope that they were really organic to the story.
Mm.
Um, Not that their identity should go without any kind of discussion or
Mhm.
exploration, because I did want to honor that, but that wasn't the point of who they were.
Right. Right.
They were more than the labels that were placed on them, or even that they had assumed for themselves. And I want to say, I want to paraphrase one of the characters in the story. Labels work until the moment they don't.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so they provide you with strength and community and a sense of awareness about who you are. But the second they don't work for you anymore, it's time to not necessarily leave them behind, but
Right.
set them aside and take them with you, but also be something different and more.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I was surprised when I started getting feedback from people who read more into those characters than I had actually intended. I thought that their identities were organic, and
Mhm.
and I found as people read the early drafts that they put so much of who they hoped and wanted those characters to be and to see in the world, that they saw them in
Mm.
ways that I didn't. And I thought that was really fun. And it kind of freaked
Oh.
me out too, because I thought, whoa, this person, this character who I just really like and who
Mhm.
is who they are,
Mhm.
is this archetype for this reader.
Oh
And,
my.
and that really imposed on me this sense of responsibility
Hmm.
that at first I didn't want, and then eventually I actually really embraced as a writer.
Hmm. Wow.
And so, trying to get back to your original question, um, I didn't
I did hit you with a
intentionally.
lot.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to remember. I don't want to get too far astray. Um, I didn't. I didn't write those characters in those scenarios with an eye towards being provocative. I didn't
Mhm.
say, okay, I have to have a queer character here, and I have to have a black character here.
Mhm.
um, I have to talk about immigration here.
Mm.
Those are all just a part of the world that I grew up in. There were things that we argued about, things that we laughed about, things that we cried about,
Mhm.
um, and they had to be in the book. And as it just so happens, the things that were normal for me growing up and are normal to so many people out in the world have become these hot button issues,
Mm.
um, for people and for organizations that are really afraid that we all of us in the collective sense
Mhm.
who don't assume
Don't fit in some
correct,
capacity. Mhm.
um, are occupying more space in this world. And so
Mm.
the more space we take up just being ourselves,
Mhm.
the more they're fighting against it. And it just so happens that this book came out right at a moment when it God, I hope to say that it's peaking, but it's
Mm.
hitting really hard.
Yeah, I mean, based on the statistics that I recently saw, it seems as though book banning in the last 5 years has been increasing. And, as we just talked about, the primary books that are being banned have LGBTQ themes, and the primary characters or most influential characters are, people of color. And, it honestly, I it blows my mind in so many ways, because at least for me, I think a lot of the books that I read growing up and that I really embrace are ones that are from those lenses. Because there's oftentimes, I mean, and this is true of any story that's done really well. There's a richness and a complexity to the characters and the story itself that, I wanted to know. Not only did I want to know these people, I knew these people because
Right,
I grew up in a similar environment as did you, to
right.
the point where I'd say about a year ago I was hanging out with a friend of mine and I said, I'll be honest, I don't feel comfortable when I am in a room of all white people, because I grew up in an environment where, I may have been the only white person in the room or one of the few. And I, uh, I don't want to say I prefer that, but that's what I know and feel comfortable with. Right. So, um, it's for me, it's like a coming home when I get to read stories like Delivery, because it's
Thank you
like,
for
yes,
saying that.
I mean, I not only do I know these people, but this is true, right? And that can be in any genre. It can be literary, it can be horror, it can be thriller, it can be whatever, right? It's really how these characters are brought forward and represented. And and again, Delivery does it beautifully. Otherwise, it would have never gotten the honor that
Thank
um
you. Thank
that
you
it's
very
gotten.
much.
And
I said you mentioned that that the book bannings are getting worse, and I agree with you. I
mm,
said something that seemed I did a reading last summer, and in the discussion afterwards, I said something that came off to someone in the audience as naive, but I meant it exactly the way I said it.
mm,
I said in the face of all of this resistance, we're making progress.
mm.
And an older gentleman, white guy who I really appreciate his advocacy, he got mad at me. He said,
Oh.
"How how can you say that we're that we that people of color and queer folk are making progress when all of these things are happening?"
Hmm.
And I said something to the effect of, that's fair. I could see why one would think that we're not moving forward and that things are worse than they were before, and in many ways they are. But if we weren't making progress, they wouldn't be fighting so hard against us. we
Oh,
would we would be
exactly.
afterthoughts.
Mhm.
and
Exactly.
and I will never say that I'm proud that there's so much resistance and hatred directed towards we who are not of the dominant culture, however you want to define that.
Mhm.
But I will say that the people that I grew up around who struggled the most, who in some ways suffered the most because who they saw themselves as was far, far away from how the dominant culture tried to
Mm.
see them,
Mhm.
they're the ones who did the work.
Mhm.
Either you die or you live a miserable life short
Mm.
of what you want to be, or you do the work to figure out how to survive and, if possible, thrive. And I don't I'm conflicted over admiring so much the people that I've witnessed have to uh, display such courage.
Mhm.
Because on the one hand, you shouldn't have to be courageous to be yourself.
Right.
Ideally, society lets you be who you are and doesn't feel threatened by you.
Right.
But but there are so many people of color and and queer folk that I knew growing up who had to do the work to survive, it
Mm.
and it created this wisdom that I think has sustained me in times when I wasn't sure which direction to go. And so I'm very thankful to them. And in some ways, by the end of the editing process of the novel, I knew that in some ways I wanted to honor that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, uh, no truer words. 'Cause and it's funny, before we got on the live stream, I was actually talking with a member of our board, and she also comes from a multicultural background. You can tell I came up corporate. um, or at least I've been in corporate for a long time. I didn't
I'm
actually come
trying
up
really
corporate.
hard not to use higher ed words.
I know, right? And we were actually making similar commentary about how an entire generation of individuals really gave, in some cases, gave up their lives to lay the groundwork so that others could just simply be themselves, right? Uh, there's no
Uh-oh, I'm
a
not
little.
sure.
Uh-oh, am I frozen?
I think we're back.
Oh, okay, cool.
Cool.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, you had just been
Um,
saying about it. There were people who laid the groundwork.
oh, who laid the groundwork, and in some cases, they gave up their lives
Yeah.
just simply to be themselves, right?
Yep.
And so that others, so that the next generation could simply be themselves. And I feel like in some ways, because we came in just as that occurred, right? Where very monumental events happened that enabled us, so that not that we didn't feel it or experience it, right? Or
Yeah.
see it
Yeah.
within our worlds, but that it wasn't nearly to the extent that they had experienced. And
I tried to dramatize that in the book in an exchange between the main character, Danny, and his mother,
mm, mm,
his Mexican mother and half white Danny.
mhm,
And he is trying to bridge a gap between them by saying, well, we share the same culture, don't we? And
mhm.
that is incredibly offensive to her
Oh, wow.
because in her mind, there's no possible way that this half-white son
Mm,
could understand the experience of a brown woman who came up a generation before him and had to fight and claw in ways that he will never understand.
mm,
And so I tried to dramatize the sacrifices that an older generation has made for the younger generation in order to not live as difficult a life,
right.
but also the alienation that that creates because they lead very different lives and see things very differently, and that can hurt. You raise your children to be better and than you and to suffer less than you, but if they end up having an experience different from you,
Mm,
they can feel really far away, and that's part of the immigration experience, right? The immigrant experience,
mm,
you bring your kids here and it's not possible for them to grow up in the same culture that you grew up in. You made that impossible by coming here.
mhm. Yeah, and well, and what's interesting too is I think that's true across the board, right? And that all we can do is do our best to empathize,
Yeah.
because in reality we can never truly understand what another has gone through,
Right.
but we can observe and we can listen and we can, associate and do our best to understand. But in terms of actually being in the shoes of another who've been through traumas that
Right.
just, you know, are inconceivable, you know. It's funny, my father, I was like the youngest of the young. Um, I used to say I was born when he was 50 and he'd go 49 because I was born like 3 months before he turned 50. And but he came up at the tail end of the Great Depression. And so for him, it was always absolutely important that we had food on the table
Yeah.
because he knew what it was like to not have anything, no food. And, where if someone gave you a piece of bread, that was like a miracle, you know.
Right.
And, you know, although we grew up poor, I would never be able to understand certain perspectives like that, because he did make sure that we always had something. So
Yep.
um, absolutely. I mean, I do think, again, One of the reasons it is Treasure Valley's Reads 2024 selection is because of the beautiful way in which you were able to bring that forward. I know
Thank you.
you and I had talked a little bit about too, and I want to make sure to comment about this for a minute. Um, how frequently has delivery already been checked out at the library? I mean, I hear it's doing pretty well there, young man.
As far as I could tell, since it arrived at the Boise Public Library in late spring, so it might have been March or April last year, it's
Mm,
been checked out consistently.
wow.
Um, because I would just every couple of weeks just log on and check to see if it was there on the shelf, and it wasn't. So, I mean, one person might have checked it out in April and never brought it back. But from what I understand, it's been in constant circulation, which is great. And with the Treasure Valley Reads program, there are more now in circulation, and so that's really nice to see. Um, there are more opportunities for people to be able to check it out and to see if it's a book that they can engage with them. So I'm very excited about that. Um, the program has been in existence since 2001,
Mm,
and I had heard about it, but I was never involved with it before. And part of that, I think, is just in growing as a writer and seeing myself as part of a broader writing community, and also a broader reading community.
mm,
But I'm super pleased that Lyd Havens and and Lyd is a Boise area poet. She's an award-winning poet, and her book Chokecherry is amazing.
mm,
And so I'm really pleased to have been co-selected with her with them. I'm sorry. Um, the company of previous authors that Lyd and I shared is part of what really just blew me away. You know, previous people who were identified by Treasure Valley Reads, you know, include people like Sandra Cisneros and Anthony
mm,
Doerr and Colson Whitehead and Tommy Orange. And so um, I never in my wildest dreams when I started writing delivery, and it was written in the third person past tense, and I was trying to be so literary, but I eventually found the voice of the character.
mm,
Never when I started writing the book did I think that it would be selected in a series of programs that included authors like that. So I'm really honored, and I'm very pleased that I'm selected with Lyd and their book. So
mm.
it's just it's I'm very happy for the book. I'm happy for me obviously, but I'm happy more so for the book.
Yep. And with that, I want to thank you as always. Whenever we chat, we always have a blast. So and thank you for being so honest and so real in this conversation.
Thank
Um,
you. If you have any pull or say in the publishing world, could you please have those big publishers come to Idaho and lend their legal expertise to the
ah,
people here fighting House Bill 710? It was just approved by the governor, and it is in its own way a book banning bill that targets
mm,
librarians and libraries. And I expect that it will be challenged legally. And I I'm not sure where to go other than to encourage others to fight legislation like that and to keep writing and reading books like Delivery and all of the others, obviously, that are on the banned book list to show people that, like yourself, you can read these books growing up, they can become a part of you, and you grow up to be a great person.
well, honestly, so to your point, anyone who's watching, if you know of any kind of legislature that has either been passed or is being considered that limits individuals' rights, please fight it. Please reach out to your local legislature. And as Tomas so aptly put it, please, 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 if you are of someone of note and pull and you make your way um, down to Idaho, please stand up and, you know, get these lawyers or and individuals who can I fight this most effectively so that not just us, but generations beyond us, our rights are not limited, right? and we all are allowed to be ourselves and to have our voice. So, with that, again, thank you. And guys, pick up delivery if you haven't already.